Hello, fellow candle maker. My name is Kevin. This is Armatage Candle Company, the premier online resource for accelerating your candle making technique and business. In today's episode, we're going to cover a little bit of the structure around our beautiful craft, which I'm going to call the 10 commandments of candle making. Okay, first commandment. Thou shalt invest in a scale, thermometer, and pouring pitcher. The number 3 things that you need to do any candle making at all are a scale, a thermometer, and a pouring pitcher. Now, why are these? Well, a scale is the only way that we can measure the right amount of ingredients. Because the truth is, everything we do is measured in weight. Why do we do this? Well, for starters, wax, all the specifications for wax are given to us in weight. Percentage of fragrance oil it can hold is given in weight. We buy it by weight. The other thing is that every piece of wax that you buy is so much easier to measure by weight. Have you ever tried to measure the literal volume of wax flakes? Or even if you were to cut the cube, it's really it's hard to do that, right? It's really hard to measure by volume. And so weight is just plain simpler. Well, in order to measure weight, you need a scale. So all candle makers should invest in, first and foremost, in a kitchen scale. A kitchen scale that can measure grams or ounces. You don't need fluid ounces. It's okay if it measures fluid ounces, but you don't really need that. And yet we do this because every single thing, wax and fragrance, are measured in weight. And the only exception is color. Color is measured kind of in like drops or shavings amounts if you're into that. Or if you're super high scale, you can do it percentage weight, but just don't worry about that. The second thing mentioned is a thermometer. You need something to measure the temperature. Temperature management is the number one gauge of whether or not your candle is going to be successful, because we need to know what temperature we're going to heat the wax to. We need to know what temperature we're going to add the fragrance oil. We need to know what temperature we're going to pour. We need to know what temperature we're going to cure. It's all temperature. So invest in either an infrared thermometer, which I highly recommend, hands off, no cleaning, a little less accurate, just stir right before you measure, or what comes with a lot of candle making kits and what you can get almost anywhere is a glass thermometer, or any other thermometer that you can stick in to some wax. Don't use it for your food, and trust the measurement. You need something to gather that information. It's super critical. And the last thing in that commandment is a pouring pitcher. This can be either the typical aluminum pouring pitcher that you see everywhere, or if you're just getting started and you have an extra one around, you can use a measuring glass even if you really feel like it. Commandment number 2, thou shalt calculate your wax and fragrance oil. Now, you can kind of go by sight, and you can go by feel, and you can go by touch, but you'll never be consistent, and you'll never be very accurate with all these candles designs that you're probably cranking out at this point. So get a calculator and remember these equations. Now, I've linked some articles and some discussion points in the description below to go into much deeper, and this video here also has a lot of information you can use to learn all the math and all the arithmetic that goes in, and it's really not that complicated. You just need to know how much wax, and then you need to know how much fragrance oil, and that's it. The amount depends on what the container and the volume and the shape of your container or jar or mold is, but at the end of the day, the math isn't that difficult. So go check that out. The third commandment is thou shalt not deliver performance without safety. So many of us candle makers rush right to the candle. We love candles so much, so we get something with a hot throw, we think that's good enough. But what we might be missing is safety. Every single candle should be tested to make sure it's meeting all the industry standards and any other criteria that you deem important for safety. Now, safety matters when you're making the candle, but it matters when you're burning the candle too. And so if you're curious, or if you want a good template for how to burn test, I've got a video here, but I've also got an article there. And I've got a free testing template for you. It's a PDF. You can just copy it. It's yours if you want it. Just go to armatagecandlecompany.com/burn-test, and you can have that testing template for free. But the point is, you don't want to deliver candles that are performing really well, but aren't safe for people to have. This is fire. You can't just put fire in someone's home and expect that everything's going to be okay. It's really critical that you lock down that safety and make sure that you know exactly what you're putting in anybody's home, because it's not worth having a great candle if it could harm somebody's property. And I know it's hard, but don't allow impatience or unintentional arrogance to get in the way of creating a safe candle. Commandment number 4, thou shalt test every candle design. And this kind of sounds like the safety thing, but it goes beyond that. The truth is that we all think that if we have the same container and wax, then it doesn't matter. Everything else can just kind of go in willy-nilly. But the truth is, though different wicks and different fragrance oils, they all behave differently. So even if you have the same wax, wick, and container, but you switch the fragrance oil, you still need to test that because fragrance oil changes the characteristics of that candle. Remember, everything added to a candle impacts everything added to a candle, and nothing is excluded. So even if you change your fragrance oil from 7% to 9%, that's technically a new design and you should run it through your safety tests. Commandment number 5 is thou shalt build a wide portfolio of suppliers. Okay, I'm filming this in 2020 and the truth is we're kind of short on supplies around our industry. It's hard to find somebody who can supply all the jars that you need on a consistent basis. And some candle makers have put all their eggs in one supplier's basket, and those suppliers are struggling too. And so it's actually shafted their entire product line because they can't get a hold of anything that they need. So the intention behind this commandment is that you spread that out, kind of like an investment portfolio, so that even if you can't get some of the right fragrance oil from one area, you have another design from another supplier or some suppliers from a different supplier that you can get a hold of just fine because they're not having any issues. And so you minimize your risk because you don't depend so strongly on a single company for providing your supplies. Commandment number 6, thou shalt not overload your wax. It's so easy to think that we just need to add more fragrance oil or we can just add all these additives and life is going to be good. But the fact of the matter is wax can only hold so much. So make sure you check the specifications of what the maximum fragrance load your wax can hold. And it's not just fragrance that goes into that number. It's also additives, other oils. Wax can only hold so much. And you'll know that you're overloading the wax if after you've cured it, you notice some sweating or some wet spots on the candle because the candle just can't structurally hold on to that much oil. So respect the numbers. Check with your supplier, check with your manufacturer if you need to. There's a maximum amount that can hold, and you need to respect that for candle making. Commandment number 7, thou shalt create and respect a temperature management plan. This goes back to calculating your temperatures and measuring those things. Before you start any candle, you should have some idea of what temperatures you want to hit. Your max temperature, for instance, shouldn't really ever be over 200 unless you're into palm wax, but you should have some idea of when you want to add your fragrance oil and when you want to pour and the approximate range that you want to cure those candles in. And that's called your temperature management plan. And there's a little more to building a plan around that. You can talk about the time management plan of how long you want it to cool for and how long you want it to cure for. But the temperature management plan generally, especially that pour temperature, plays a huge role in the profile of that candle after it's been created. So build your plan and then respect the plan in your process. Because if you don't, you won't know if the reason that it looks bad is related to one thing or another. And so the more that you can build a consistent process into what you're doing, the more success and the easier it will be to measure your successes and ditch your failures. Commandment number 8, thou shalt not use only one wax. Why? Well, even if you are a self-acclaimed soy wax candle maker, maybe you only make palm wax or maybe you only make paraffin, the idea here is that to be a well-rounded chandler, you should understand a little bit more than just your one wax. And the reason being is sometimes when you blend these things together, you get something even more beautiful than what you originally had by itself, or you might enjoy it, or the properties are better for what you're doing. It's good to branch out. Even if you just branch out every once in a while, look for deals or just buy a pound, just buy 5 pounds here and there and try out different waxes. It'll help you understand how your process fits into the rest of the industry and how those candles are made too. And I think that you'll enjoy it because, if you have a good process down, then you just kind of plug and play different waxes. You get to try new things out, and who knows, maybe you'll like it. Commandment number 9, thou shalt use appropriate materials. The truth is, there's unfortunately a lot of misinformation out there. If you go to Pinterest or you just kind of Google it, you might find these follow-along crafts that they're recommending things to put in your candles or to use for wicks or to use for wax that really don't belong. And we did a whole segment on 3 things you shouldn't use in your candles, so if you're curious about some of that, you can go there. But essentially, Don't use anything that isn't intended to burn, anything that can melt, anything that could leak, anything that's really not supposed to be a wick, even if it starts to work at first. Just be careful. It's more of a safety issue. Like, I don't really care what you put in your candle, but I do care that you're making safe candles, and other people will too, so be careful with that. And the final commandment is that thou shalt be generous. Candle making is a gift to humanity. Who doesn't love a good candle? I mean, the truth is you and I probably got into this because we like candles, and making them ourselves is a little bit cheaper, or maybe you're starting a business and you love that. But no matter what you're doing, if you're making more than one candle, you don't know how good it's going to go. Gathering the opinions of people around you can help make you more well-rounded and understand whether that scent throw is actually good or if it's actually really bad. And even if it's hard to hear sometimes, we need to know when to cut our losses. But that's it. Those are the 10 commandments of candle making. I think that they're just kind of for fun, right? They're not real rules, but take them. Maybe you learn something new. Maybe you disagree entirely. Anyways, I hope you have a great week. I hope you make beautiful candles, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!